It's really great to see you guys tonight, even it's online through our computers, phones, tablet, or whatever you're using. But we really hope that we can accompany you for the next several hours with a very beneficial webinar and with two amazing speakers that will share their opinions and perspectives about our topic today. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Kalila Queentania. I am part of the Young Southeast Asia team, and I will be the master of ceremony on today's webinar, Youth in Action Sustainable Urban Habitat for Post-Pandemic Era. So before we starting this webinar, as the Young Southeast Asia team, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to our organization's partners, Sejuta Cita, Youth Life, Youth Opportunities Hub, Simulegum, the Apolitical Pipeline, Enter Nusantara, Upakara Nusantara Foundation, Scholarship Region, Hari Hutan, Green Fighter Rwanda, Break Free from Plastic Awareness Initiative Nigeria, Scouts International Eco Ambassadors, Audi Care, and Anak Cinta Lingkungan, who already helped us to make this webinar happen. Right now, I would like to read the rules before the webinar started. So the first one is to attend our webinar, please kindly to set your Zoom names to your country name. For example, Indonesia _Kalila. And whenever possible, please turn on your camera and using the virtual background that we already provide and share it through the email several hours back then. And for the Q&A session, please write your question in the chat box during the webinar, and later the moderator will read your question during the session. And lastly, please note that only those who attended the webinar until the end, that those who fill out the feedback form will be getting the certificate. So please, guys, don't forget to fill out the feedback form later in the end of the webinar to get the certificate. So before we officially started our webinar tonight, I would like to welcome Abida Wirawasiwi as Young Southeast Asia representative from Indonesia to open our webinar. For Abida, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kalila. Greetings, your speaker, participants, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank to every one of you for being here with us today. We are very pleased to welcome you on Young Southeast Asia, first day of virtual event commemorating World Habitat Day 2021. Before we get started, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all of you who generously help us this event come together, become a success. The youth speakers and moderator, my dear friends Ineza, Denny, and Seruni, organization partners, and all Young Southeast Asia members, we could not have done it without you. The webinar title is Sustainable Urban Habitat for Post-Pandemic. Its title is that the current global recovery post-COVID-19 pandemic is the right time to us to accelerate our urban habitat toward the more sustainable future. To make our urban habitat sustainable, first, we need to tackle the environmental challenge caused by the pandemic. For example, there is a huge environmental threat of untreated disposable mass waste caused by COVID-19. The first speaker would like to share with you about the best practice on recycling PPE disposable mass by Upakara Persada Nusantara Foundation through collaboration and cooperation. The second speaker will present what is the role of urbanization to climate change and how the young people like us can combat it through various activities, such as those already done by Green Factor Project in Rwanda. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to take too much of the time, so I will give you a warm welcome from Young Southeast Asia. Do enjoy the event. Please ask through the chat box during presentation, and thank you very much for your sincere attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abida, for the warm welcome speech. And ladies and gentlemen, that makes our webinar has officially started tonight. And right now, I would like to introduce Seruni Salsabila as our moderator. Seruni Salsabila is an undergraduate biology student from the University of Indonesia. She has 1 year international experience and 4 years national experience in creative team, social media planning, negotiation, and team management. She participated in international conference as Indonesia Youth Delegate and was a former consultant and mentor in analyzing Indonesia's NDC at Care About Climate. She is passionate about SDGs, especially SDGs 7 and 13, and currently she served as the working group lead of climate action and sustainable lifestyle at Yunga Summit 2021 in leading more than 250 youth. Seruni was a moderator at World Climate Congress 2021 with more than 15 international speakers, more than 1,700 registered participants, and more than 100 contributors throughout the process of drafting. For Seruni, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kalila. Before introducing the speakers and young Southeast Asia, I would like to share everyone a quote from Kofi Annan, former Secretary General of the United Nations, which he stated, "The world is reaching the tipping point beyond which climate change may become irreversible. If this happens, we risk denying present and future generations the right to a healthy and sustainable planet. The whole of humanity stands to lose." Greeting, good day, and good evening to our honorable speakers, Young Southeast Asia Organizing Committee, and wonderful audience. First of all, I would like to welcome you all to the third webinar of Youth in Action organized by Young Southeast Asia. Happy World Habitat Day. We do hope everyone here is in healthy condition. My name is Seruni Salsabila, and tonight I will serve you as the moderator of the third webinar of Youth in Action with the topic of sustainable urban habitat for post-pandemic era. Introducing to the Young Southeast Asia, Young Southeast Asia are a team of young, hopeful change makers from Southeast Asia, and they are on a mission to create a better place for everyone to live in. The Young Southeast Asia project focuses on the Sustainable Development Goals number 13 on climate action. The members met during Sustainable Development Conference earlier this year, and we have been in touch ever since. The Youth in Action series is a webinar designed to educate the youth on the many ways they can create a better world in this post-pandemic era with a focus on Sustainable Development Goals, climate change, and climate action. And now, to start off today's webinar, we would like to introduce our first speaker, Denny Adiputra from Indonesia. Denny Adiputra is an associate at SSEK Legal Consultants, representative of Upakara Persada Nusantara Foundation. Denny holds a Bachelor of Laws from the University of Indonesia and is currently working as an associate at a law firm based in Jakarta, as well as being part of the Upakara Persada Nusantara Foundation. Passionate about SDG number 11, he previously participated at the Ecosperity Young Leaders Dialogue and presented at the Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovation Cities in Singapore, addressing the future of sustainable cities and communities. Denny is also passionate in various social and environmental issues, specifically from a legal standpoint, and has advocated for a wide range of issues by participating at various international competitions, including the World University Debating Championship at Cape Town, Harvard National Model United Nations in Boston, Philip C. Jessup International Moot Court competition in Washington, D.C., and other international fora. With regards to the proliferation of various issues, specifically for the youth, he was an invited speaker for SSEK Youth Speak League, Universitas Indonesia chapter, where he talked about the SDGs, served as the chief adjudicator for various national debate tournaments, as well as a director for the Indonesia Model United Nations at UNDP Council. There will be a question and answer sessions after each speaker has done their presentation. So dear participants, you may want to prepare your questions and send it to the chat box once we open the Q&A session. Okay, so Denny, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Seruni, for the delightful introduction. Am I audible? Thank you. Next, please. Yeah, we are from Upakara Persada Nusantara Foundation. And as Abida has previously explained briefly, we're going to be talking about one of our programs, which is the recycling of single-use masks. But before we do that, we just want to introduce ourselves. So we are Upakara Persada Nusantara Foundation, and the name comes from the Sanskrit language, which in essence means taking care of our earth. And there are two main key focus areas that is the basis of our operations. Firstly, we want to educate the community on environmental matters. And secondly, we want to spread awareness and ensure the sustainable development of our environment. Next, please. And how do we achieve this goal? We have several programs, and I just want to highlight a few. Firstly, we have projects, and this takes the form of supporting farmers in the cultivation of vegetables such as onions, and we do this by giving guidance, we give training on organic farming and the techniques. We also have cooperation, and this is something that we want to talk further today. And the cooperation is specifically regarding the recycling of single-use masks from polypropylene or plastics. And we do this by working together with the Indonesian Institute of Sciences, or which is better known as LIPI. Other than cooperation, we also have several research projects. Among them include the processing of sugar factory waste into organic fertilizers and also nanocellulose. And there are also other activities that we routinely do, such as webinars or seminars with a variety of topics, not just about the environment, but any interesting topic for the greater community. Now, next, please. Now, before we talk specifically on the project, let's talk about why there is a need for the project to begin with. And let's talk about the foundation in which triggered our sense of urgency. And that is because, as we are all very well aware of, we're currently in a COVID-19 pandemic situation. As a result of the pandemic, individuals, you and me, when we go out, when we have to do our task, when we have to socialize, we have to protect ourselves. And that's by using masks, specifically single-use masks, because that is the most accessible mask that is available and affordable for everyone. The problem with this is that from statistics we got from the Straits Times, every minute around the planet, 3 million masks are used. Next, please. Now, if we multiply the numbers with everyone on the globe, that's roughly 4 billion, more than 4 billion masks per day. And this has severe consequences to the environment. In Indonesia specifically, a few weeks ago, several of our landfills in Jakarta, the capital city, was overflowed with masks, which created significant delay to the disposal of other garbage. Next, please. Now, and in order to further understand the harm or the urgency, I would like to show this picture. This was taken from the previous webinar, the second Youth in Action webinar. And if you look closely, the disposable surgical masks that we use in our day-to-day lives are essentially made of polypropylene, meaning it's a form of plastic. And if you look even closer, if you look at the upper layer, you look at the middle layer, and you also look at the inner layer, then you can see that all these three layers are made of polypropylene. What happens then? Because when you use the mask, when I use the mask and we dispose of them, because by nature they're only single use, dispose of them, they either end up in the landfill or in the worst case scenario, wild animals can take them and they can be scattered all over the environment. They can end up in our oceans. And the problem with this is that even if there is fragmentation, there is degradation after several weeks of the masks, the form in which these masks take is micro or nanoplastics. And this is extremely harmful to the environment because at the end of the day, they can be digested by animals. They can be even digested by animals because of the food chain. And these nanoplastics, microplastics are toxic chemicals and are very detrimental and have harmful consequences to the environment. Next, please. Now, having established the urgency of why we are attempting to recycle or why we initiated the program, we want to talk more on the regulatory framework and how the program is conducted. Because recently, this year, a few months ago, the Indonesian government issued a regulation, specifically the Ministry of Environment, which for the first time differentiated the types of waste associated with the usage of masks. So to clarify, before the issuance of this regulation, all masks, regardless of whoever used it, would automatically be considered as hazardous waste. The problem with automatically being classified or categorized as hazardous waste is that there's specific procedures to dispose of the masks. For example, if the masks are considered hazardous, then therefore, one of the only ways to dispose it would be through an incinerator. So the mask would be burned up to 800 degrees Celsius or more, and it would have no value. And again, at the end of the day, it could end up in our ecosystem, in our environment, which is also very harmful. Now, what this regulation brings is that it brings clarity and it categorizes. It differentiates between hazardous waste and domestic waste. Now, based on this regulation, there are types of waste related to COVID-19. There are waste resulting from the treatment of confirmed COVID-19 patients. There are waste resulting from testing or vaccination facilities, such as face shields, vials, masks, or gloves. And then there's domestic waste. The first two wastes that I mentioned is considered as hazardous waste. So automatically, by virtue of being resulting from the treatment of confirmed COVID-19 patients or resulting from testing or vaccination, then they are hazardous. That's why our program here focuses on the recycling on masks that are sourced from domestic waste, because it means that these domestic waste are either A, not contaminated, or B, it's safer and there's regulatory approval for us to conduct the recycling. Now, also, the regulation provides differences in the sources of waste because there are different sources would entail different categorizations of these wastes. For example, health facilities, hospitals, laboratories, isolation facilities, either from the government or private isolation facilities, the testing and vaccination facilities would all be categorized as hazardous waste if all the waste is sourced from these locations. But on the other hand, domestic household waste, commercial areas would not generally would not be hazardous waste. So that is why our program in recycling the mask would generally focus on domestic waste sourced from households, from industrial areas, or from, for example, residential areas such as apartments. Next, please. And also, one of the frameworks that we work on and justifies the recycling of masks is the issuance of the Management of Mask Guideline by the Ministry of Health. And it justifies and confirms the view that masks used by the community should not be categorized as medical waste and should be categorized as regular waste, and therefore we are able to recycle them. Next, please. Now that we have explained sort of the framework in which we operate on, we want to talk a little bit about the process. This is an overview of the process of how we recycle the mask because as a disclaimer, our foundation cooperates with LIPI, which is the Sciences Institute of Indonesia, and the technology, the know-how, the expertise is all on the LIPI side, meaning that we would be better off now to talk on it as a general overview. Now, essentially, there are three steps in the process to which we conduct the recycling of these masks. Firstly, we conduct collection. What this means is that when we need to be able to gather the masks, and we first use the help of volunteers. We've started this program from June of 2021. The program itself began in June, but the development was before June. And we now have around 300 volunteers who help us collect masks. And the collection of the masks is conducted from mouth to mouth. The volunteers go to certain areas, residential areas, offices, apartments, and they collect the masks. And this is conducted in the greater Jakarta area. And secondly, we also rely on collection points. There are several places which we cooperate with where we place collection points, for example, in residential apartments. And therefore, because there's a large amount of people who live in these apartments, it would be easier for them to just dispose their masks in a collection point, and in turn, we can collect them. Now, the second process is the process of disinfecting. We discussed earlier that the waste here is household waste or domestic waste, which means it's not hazardous and it's not contaminated. But we can never be too careful, right? Because we never know that the masks used by these people, even in residential areas, they might have close contact with COVID-19 patients. And therefore, it's always better when we collect the masks, then the volunteers, the senders, will disinfect the masks. And in turn, our foundation will also disinfect the masks when we collect them. Lastly, is the conduct of recycling. And here, let's talk briefly on how it's actually conducted. We talked about the collection, we talked about the sterilization, there's a drying, it's going to be cut up into small pieces, and then it's going to go into an extrusion machine, which presses the masks and forms, as an output, recycled plastic pellets. And these plastic pellets are very versatile in the sense that you can shape them and you can form them into several final products. So, for example, you can put them in a press machine and the end product would result in plastic buckets or plastic bags or other appliances made from plastic, depending on the process. Now, the end goal of the recycling process is to have zero waste, because without the recycling process, either the mask would be incinerated or they would end up in landfills and the ecosystem, which is very harmful. Or even if there is not zero waste, at the very least, we are prolonging the usage of the plastics contained in the single-use masks, because without the recycling, they would just be disposed and tossed away. So this is why it's very important to do the recycling process. Next, please. So what are the challenges and difficulties we have faced in these few months that we have begun the program? First of all, as you may guess, it's the collection of masks and also the logistics to the collection of masks. Because if I'm not mistaken, in Indonesia, LIPI is the only one who has the technology, and we are one of the only foundations working with LIPI to gather the mask and also recycle. Even if there are other organizations who collect masks, but they would generally do so with the purpose of incinerating the mask and disposing the mask. So the collection of masks is difficult because the collection points or where we have to source the mask are sporadic in nature, right? They are distributed in a wide area, and with the limited number of volunteers we have, it's extremely difficult to do the collection of masks, and especially the logistics of it, because they have to be sent to a certain facility, noting that the equipment is currently only owned by LIPI. And therefore, we usually rely on volunteers' initiative and their expenses to send the mask to us. So That would not be an ideal scenario, but that is the reality that we are facing. Secondly, it's also the cost of recycling. I mentioned about the fact how the technology is quite new. Even around the globe, there are several firms or organizations that I know of who are also trying to do this. And in Indonesia specifically, the costs that we have to factor in is not only the acquisition of equipment, because it requires specific equipment, but also the training of individuals in order for them to be able to develop and conduct the recycle effectively. The ideal condition would be able to work with other organizations or small, medium enterprises and train them to be able to recycle and at the end of the day, conduct a mass production of the recycling of masks. Next, please. So what's next? What are the steps? What are the outtakes and what alternatives do we have now? Well, firstly, as grim as it may seem, COVID-19 is still here. There's a fluctuation of cases globally. You and I are experiencing this. And because of that, when we go out and we have to do what we have to do, we have to use masks, and that makes masks inevitable. And because of this, echoing what Abida earlier said also, it's best to be wise on the usage of masks. It's best to refrain ourselves from going out if it's not absolutely necessary. If we don't have to work or if it's not important, then we should just refrain from going out altogether, because when we go out, it means we're using masks. It means that we're contributing to the accumulation of masks in our ecosystem and the environment, which we have established is very harmful. And secondly, alternatives do exist with regards to the single-use mask. We know that fabric masks exist. In Indonesia, for example, the government approves and acknowledges that you can use fabric masks because it's also a very good alternative. It's reusable. It's easier on the environment. And there's also talks and research or developments about using biodegradable materials for these masks. But in Indonesia specifically, the technology is not yet accessible, and the materials for biodegradable masks would lead to expensive prices, which would not be accessible for the greater community. And lastly, we require support from all stakeholders and all layers of society. What I mean by stakeholders is we're talking about governments, we're talking about private sectors. The support can be in the form of establishing collection points in a lot of public facilities and public places so that it's easier for the people to dispose their masks closer from their homes and making the collection more efficient. And also, it could also take the form of the logistics, maybe providing some sort of transportation collection system that is cost effective. This is all to ensure that these masks, we are able to reduce the amount of masks that go into the environment, because that is an extremely harmful consequence of COVID-19, whether we like it or not, because it's just the unprecedented use of these single masks, which led to the masks being sporadically entering the environment. And also, when we're talking about layers of society, we're talking about you and me, and how we can talk with our family and our friends and discuss, firstly, what it means to use a mask and what are the consequences of using a single-use mask for the environment. But secondly, also raising awareness that there are alternatives such as recycling for the mask, and perhaps collaborating in your community to collect masks, or at least to ensure that they're not thrown out or disposed of irresponsibly in the environment. So everyone has a role to play, and everyone should have a role to play in reducing the amount of the masks that are entering our environment. Next, please. Now that concludes the presentation. If you want to to ask us further questions, if you want to contact us, if you want to cooperate, if you want to discuss anything, you are open to join our Facebook at Upakara Persada Nusantara, or you can follow us at Instagram on Upakara Persada Nusantara. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation, and I yield my time back to the moderator, Seruni. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Denny. That was an insightful information. And let me share everyone the conclusion of our first topic webinar from Mr. Denny. Coming from Upakara Persada Nusantara Foundation, which in Sanskrit language means taking care of our earth, the organization has two key points or purposes. The first one is to educate community on environmental matters, and secondly, spreading awareness and ensuring the sustainable development of the environment. Looking at the urgency of today's issues during the pandemic, which is the rise of single-use masks, which gives harm to the environment and quality of health, statistically shows approximately around 4 billion masks are used each day. So, according to Mr. Denny stated before, from the upper layer to inner layer of single-use masks are made of polypropylene. When it was disposed, they go to the landfill and go to soil or ocean. Upakara Persada Nusantara Foundation found a problem for this, in which research shows single-use masks form a microplastic, where the plastic cannot be degraded in short period of time, and it might take 100 years. Ended up in the food or wild animals or ocean, in which the animal itself is fish, and when we eat the fish from ocean that consists of microplastics, it brings toxicity to health. Moreover, it is also harmful and increase pollutions. And there are three types of masks according to the Ministry of Health in Indonesia. The first one is waste resulting treatment for COVID-19 positive. Second one, waste from testing vaccine, including face shield, masks, and gloves. The last one is domestic waste, which coming from household, industrial, or residential areas. According to management of masks by Ministry of Health Indonesia, masks used by a community and not categorized as medical waste are treated as regular waste. So, Upakara Persada Nusantara Foundation cooperated with Indonesia Institute of Science or LIPI on the process of mass recycling, in which mass coming from domestic waste. It includes three big processes to recycling of the mass itself. The first one is collecting or collection, which volunteer collect the mass from residential area and some points from populated area, in this case from Jakarta, and it goes to the disinfecting, in which the volunteer must disinfect the mask in case it has been used from people contacted by confirmed infected by COVID-19. And the last one is going through recycling, in which masks go through extrusion, pushing to a machine to produce recycled plastic pellets and develop onto other products. So the purpose of recycling is to produce a zero waste from single-use masks. And there are two challenges according to Upakara Persada Nusantara Foundation project. The first one is collection mass and logistic, and the second one is cost of recycling. So what's next? Since the usage of masks is inevitable, especially during the pandemic, there needs to be an alternative from single-use masks, but it is expensive. So it requires support from stakeholders such as government, private sectors, and layer of society. So that is all as the conclusion. Now we open the question and answer session. To participants who would like to ask a question to the speaker, please do send the question to the chat box. Okay, so we have questions here. The first question is from Musadik Mubarak from India, and the question is, what can we do to respond to COVID-19 in informal cities? Maybe it is also regarding about the disposable mask. So should we give to Mr. Denny, or we state all questions first?
Maybe I can answer directly.
Okay, sure.
Thank you for the question, Musadik from India. The question is, what can we do to respond to COVID-19 in informal cities? By informal cities, I assume that you mean maybe rural areas, which are the opposite of urban areas. Now, first and foremost, from the resources that I've read, and the COVID-19 virus feeds on ignorance. So I think that the most important thing that we can do, especially in rural areas where the assumption is that information is not spread widely, there's lack of awareness, is to spread awareness and spread information regarding first and foremost protocols that should be implemented for maintaining the health of the people and the community around you. And this takes the form of using protective equipment, masks, when you gather or even refrain from conducting gatherings. But specifically in the context of the usage of masks, maybe because the context is a rural area, where usually these rural areas are sparsely populated, or for example, there are distances between communities and most likely activities are outdoors, then you could use alternatives to using masks, because you don't always need to use the plastic single-use mask, because the alternatives such as cloth or fabric mask are just as effective if you are working outside, outdoors, especially when you're not meeting a congregation of people and it's just and you're implementing safe distances. So I think that's the key thing that you can do. Awareness in these rural areas that you asked about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Denny. So moving on to the next questions. What can you do, advise to countries who would like to adopt your mass disposal technique, but are having challenges in doing so? Should I repeat once more?
Yes, can you please repeat the question?
Okay. What can you advise to countries who would like to adapt your mass disposal technique, but are having challenges in doing so?
Yes, thank you. That's a very good question. What we can advise is based on our experience, and based on our experience, there are obvious obstacles and difficulties that is preventing a wider acceptance or adoption of this recycling program. The first is technology, because we must acknowledge that there are different levels in the acquisition of technology, and it takes time for the development of the technology in one region over the other, or for example, the accessibility to the technology, because we do need specific technology and equipment in order to conduct the recycling of these masks. So first and foremost, that would be technology, and the suggestion would be is cooperation, because at our foundation, we obviously don't have the resources for the technology, but the opportunity came up for us to cooperate with the Indonesian Institute of Sciences, who has the technology but requires resources for the collection of the mask. That's where cooperation can develop. Secondly, we should also be talking about logistics, because these masks are used by individuals, and individuals are separated, especially in countries such as Indonesia, which is an archipelagic state, meaning that there are 17,000 islands, and if the technology is not there yet, there's only limited facilities, and therefore it's very difficult to move around these masks from one location to another, and maybe it would be extremely expensive also to do so. So logistics would have to play an important role in the planning for the adoption of this program. And lastly, I think is the training and awareness. By awareness, we want to make sure that people are acceptive of this program, meaning that they want to contribute. At the end of the day, even logistical issues can be solved if people have the awareness to go to the collection points or to go to our facilities to give their own masks. And also training in the sense that when more people are able to do the recycling, then there's going to be more recycling conducted and more products as an output and more variety of products also. So I think those are the three main suggestions in the form of difficulties that we faced previously. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Denny. So from the previous answer, we can conclude that for one of the things that is important is the logistics and the training itself. Okay, moving on to the next question. Aside from spreading awareness, how can the youth take part in such activities, given the fact that we are advised to stay indoors most of the time?
Yes, that's true. We are advised to stay indoors most of the time, but it depends on, well, there are lenient policies which allow us to go outside if we are required to go outside. And I think that improving the environment and conducting sustainable activities constitutes as an activity that is very important. So first of all, if your local government has or implements a lenient policy that allows you to go outside, then it's even better for you. You can start to collect masks or actually do small things in your community, like tangible things, like clean the environment around you to make sure that the mask or the waste as related to COVID-19 doesn't end up in our waterways or in our soil. So instead of just raising awareness, which I think is also very important, by the way, raising awareness, you can do these tangible actions such as cleaning the environment, taking your friends to join these initiatives. If you are in Indonesia, specifically if you're in Jakarta, you can contact our foundation. Maybe you can help in collecting these masks, because there are so many things that the youth can do, and it's just not limited to spreading awareness. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. That was a great answer. So on the previous question, it was from Asiana Acapado from Philippines. And now, next question from Arinta Satyasari. Does waste of masks you mentioned before have effect on climate change? What should we do or implement to reduce the effect of climate change? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that is a very broad question. Seeing that, I would think that I would not have the competence to answer that right now, because there would be a chain of events and a chain of cycles through scientific reasoning to explain the occurrence of climate change specifically related to the usage of masks. But what I can tell you is that in the broader sense, climate change is not only the changing of temperature, it's also changes to our ecosystem. And the most direct consequence of masks going into the ocean, going into our soil, is it's polluting our soil. It means that crops won't be able to grow as efficiently as it is currently doing. There is going to be a degradation on the quality because of the toxic materials contained in the plastic. There's also going to be a decrease in, for example, in the population of certain animals in the sea. If in the very worst case scenario, there is a digestion of these toxic materials, in the very worst case where plastic is accumulated to the level where these animals are inevitably eating these plastics, and that would directly harm and imbalance our ecosystem, which would be categorized into the definition of climate change. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So approximately we have 6 minutes left. Moving on to the next questions. From Philippines, Natalie Salvador. Which is the most harmful face mask that can harm the environment besides surgical face masks?
Thank you for the question. What we are focusing our program on is only on these plastic face masks, because these are the masks which is made from plastic materials, which cannot be degraded over time, or at the very least, it requires hundreds of years to be degraded or fragmented. Now, when you ask about which other face masks are also harmful for the environment, um, there are articles that I've read where these fabric or cloth face masks are also actually very harmful, may be harmful to the environment, depending on how you dispose the cloth or fabric face mask. So the question now is not whether there is a face mask that is not harmful to the environment. The question is, which is the lesser evil, or which is a face mask that has the least amount of harmful consequences to the environment? And the answer to that would be, ideally, it would be the reusable face mask, right? It would be biodegradable face mask because it can be biodegradable, as the name suggests. But again, we cannot be too altruistic at this current stage because accessibility is not there yet for us to be using biodegradable face masks. Or for example, cloth or fabric face masks can only be used maybe on average 50 times, 60 times for it to be effective. So again, which is harmful, I would be inclined to say that the most harmful is the plastic mask. But due to the limited amount of the types of face masks, then we cannot really make a list of which is less, or which is the most harmful, which is less harmful, which is least harmful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So another question from Sophia Belgar. It is regarding face mask, which can be the only medical waste turned to a regular waste to be recycled. Can there be a change of other polypropylene to be also recycled, beside from face mask?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Is face mask can be the only medical waste turned to a regular waste, which it is stated from the Ministry of Health in Indonesia, to be recycled? Can there be a change of other PPEs to be also recycled?
Okay, thank you for the question. Maybe I wasn't clear, but just to clarify, the regulation or the guideline from the Ministry of Health is issued because there was an urgency. There's a rise of people using masks, and the masks end up in our environment and landfills. And therefore, the government changed the regulation where it previously prohibited face masks to be recycled because face masks are hazardous waste in previous regulations. So the regulation specifically addresses the issue of the rising usage of face masks. So to answer your question, can other forms of polypropylene or PPE, or can other PPE be recycled? Then so long as it's not categorized as medical waste, then yes, it can be recycled. But our program focuses on face masks because that is the glaring issue, or that is the biggest issue that we are facing in our environment related to COVID-19 right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Hope that answered the question. This will be our last question from Rutwan Ibrahim from Sudan. We have all talked about the challenges, but what are the solutions and suggestions that we, as environmentalists, answer to limit? Do we stop or reduce it? And what are the recommendations that each summary of recommendation must have?
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat the question? I think I missed the last sentence.
So from the previous slides regarding the challenges, we have all talked about the challenges, but what are the solutions and suggestions that we as environmentalists answer to limit? And I think it is related, do we stop the mask itself, the plastic mask, or reduce it? And what are the recommendations?
Okay. Thank you for the question. I think I get two questions from that. Firstly, do we stop using the face mask? And secondly, what are the recommendations? Now,
yes.
Obviously, we're not advocating for an ultimate prohibition on single-use face masks because that would be unrealistic. We acknowledge that at the present time, there is no alternative because alternatives are currently being developed. But at least we as environmentalists or people who care about the environment, we try to minimize any harmful consequences that occur to the environment. And one of the way to minimize that is, as we've discussed earlier, is either through prolonging the life of single-use masks. This means that the plastics used in the single-use mask will be converted into other products which can be used for our daily appliances. Or secondly, we can reduce the frequency of using the face mask. So, which means that, I mean by reducing the frequency, by reducing your frequency of going out or meeting other people, especially when it's not urgent or when it's not mandatory. So that would directly reduce the amount of face masks that are used, but we're not advocating for the prohibition of the face masks. Now, secondly, I think on the point of recommendation, the direct recommendation would essentially be a summary of the entire presentation, which is firstly, we reduce the frequencies of going out. Secondly, we spread awareness. We tell our friends and families that maybe you shouldn't go out, and maybe you should be more careful and wise where you put your mask, because oftentimes we randomly dispose of our mask, right? So it's better maybe to put it in a secure location where no birds or wild animals can take the mask and spread it around the ecosystem. It's these little day-to-day things that we can do as environmentalists or as people who care about the environment. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a concrete large actions such as conducting recycling specifically, but all these accumulate to something extremely beneficial if it's conducted as a community, as a larger part of the society. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the recommendations, your presentation, and all answers. We hope the answers have already given to the questions before. Now, moving on, the question and answer has elapsed from our first speaker. We are now moving on the polling in which the host will be conducting it. So, Kalila, the floor is yours.
So thank you so much, Seruni. So guys, we already made the polling and it will pop up on your screen in a bit. And please kindly to fill up the poll because it will means a lot to us. I will share the result. And for the first question, most of you guys are from Asia. 92% of this participant is from Asia. And there is 7% from Africa. And there is also 1% from North or South America. And then there's a lot of countries, right? And for the age, there is a lot of people from 18 until 21 years old in about 34%. And there is also more than 26 years old that participating today. It is 24%. And it is also same as the more than 26 years old. Under 18 years old, there is 24% of the participants. And lastly, the people that age between 22 until 26, there is 19% of them. And then the third question is, well, it shows that most of the people that participating tonight is mostly our students. And the second one is also worker, which is 18% of the participants tonight are worker. And there's also 5% researcher, and the other is 8% of other occupations that there's no in the list. And then for the fourth questions, and it shows that most of you guys, 74% of the participants tonight knows about the Sustainable Development Goals. And sadly, there is 26% of people that didn't know about the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. And the fifth question is, there is also 69% of you guys that knows about the SDG 13 about focusing on climate action, and there is also 31 that didn't know. And then people knows this webinar is from social media, mostly are from social medias. There is more than 50% of them. And there's also from friends, 17%, family, 1%, and the other is 28%. And the last question is, most of you guys are absolutely excited to join our next webinar, which will be conducted on 4th of October. So don't forget to participate and register if you haven't yet. And thank you so much for everyone that already filled up the poll. It really means a lot to us. And thank you so much. And I will give it back to Seruni and introducing our second speaker. So, Seruni, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kalila, for conducting the polling. And the polling was fun. Hopefully, everyone is having fun while answering the poll. Now we are entering the second topic of today's session by our second speaker, Ineza Umuhoza Grace from Rwanda. Ineza Umuhoza Grace is a co-director at Loss and Damage Youth Coalition and a founder of the Green Fighter from Rwanda. Ineza is an ecofeminist impact-driven actor in the climate change and environment protection sector serving the global community based in Rwanda. She holds a bachelor's degree in water and environmental engineering from the University of Rwanda, which shaped her to engage in climate justice by contributing on the national and international level. She is the one of the winner of the hashtag Watch Our Impact 2021. In 2017, she started the Rwanda youth NGO called the Green Fighter with the aim to increase an active contribution in the creation of a better and protected environment in the community. With a team of 10 youth, they engage in project design, project implementation, environment education. In 2020, she co-founded the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, aiming to create a borderless youth partnership to seek climate justice through taking action on loss and damage. Today, the coalition is present in more than 45 countries with roughly 350 members. Ineza is a leader by example with critical thinking to drive solutions to complex challenges. She believes in the power of equality and inclusiveness voices in the decision making, which strengthen her involvement in storytelling to highly express the community's hope and concern in the decision-making process. Reminder for everyone to take a note and prepare your question for our next question and answer sessions. Okay, so moving on. Ineza Umuhoza Grace, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for the warm introduction for me. And I will also thank the organizers and the past speaker because I think this is the kind of event that is quite sufficient to drive youth in understanding most of our current impact. And I would like to share my deepest apologies. I won't be able to share my camera because I am in an area where the connection is not quite stable, but I'm so grateful that you get to have my picture. So, you kind of know how I look like. And I think maybe in the future, I will be in a place where there's enough connection that will allow me to show my face. If it's okay with the organizers, I think you can share my my PowerPoint and then I can start the presentation. So to start, climate crisis is not a future scenario that we are waiting to see happening in the future. It's a current reality for most of us, especially for vulnerable communities who are most located in the global south. And based on the question, we have more than most of our participants are from Asia. Asia is one of the countries who are prone to be vulnerable to the effects of climate change, which is starting to be quite constant. And with the IPCC report that was recently shared in the UNFCCC, the cover picture, you can see it on your right. you can see that our planet is on the red. So we are quite in the middle of a crisis, and we are very doomed if we are not really opening our minds to change our action, and also to, as the past speaker said, we need to do small actions to really ensure that we are creating hope for the future. Next slide, please. So urbanization is one of the contributors to the climate change. To break it down in order to try to understand is, if I can use an example, when a high number of population is living in a very small area, they tend to exploit or over exploit the natural resources such as air, land, food, and water. And this can lead to the degradation of the habitat in that specific area. In most countries, especially in the global south, we have a rural to urban migration that is driven by the search of jobs, education, or the change of a lifestyle to develop ourselves. This is one of the issues that we are facing, because the community are increasing the carbon footprint in those small settlements that they're creating, and it makes it even harder, because now the urban population is increasing. But for me, I take it as a solution, because that means that we have many young people across the world who are growing up, and for young people, we tend to be solution-driven person. So I think it's yes a challenge, but it can be also an opportunity. The most challenge of urbanization is the fact that unplanned urbanization contributes to climate change, and the negative effects of climate change, such as drought, heat waves, rainfall, and cyclones, become more frequent. If you check the news, most of the time in the past, these effects were quite common in the global south, but now, because climate change impacts no borders, now even developed countries are being vulnerable, because they're like in Germany, they're flooding, in the USA, they're heat wave, so no one is really at safe. That's why we really need to work together. Next, please. So in general, rural community are the ones who are often highlighted to be vulnerable on climate change impact. But I'm here to tell you that even peri-urban or urban youth, we are exposed to. I come from Rwanda. You can see the picture on the left. There's the picture of my country next to the city. So Rwanda is a very small but yet beautiful country located in the heart of Africa. And unity, work, and patriotism is what drives us. So for me personally, I have the memory. I grew up in a peri-urban area, and I have a memory of waking up in the middle of the night to save my life, because excessive rainfall associated with the wind destroyed my house ceiling. And today, this is a kind of a reality for most of us, where children, women, and youth are forced to save our lives due to the exaggeration of are not choosing to be part of the victim. We want to be part of the solution. So that's the first I choose to undertake. Next slide, please. As said by Seruni, in 2017, I started what is known today as the Green Fighter. The reason why I started is because I felt that there was a need to engage youth, and the need for us to show that we are quite capable of giving solutions. So the Green Fighter is a youth NGO operating in Rwanda to contribute to the creation of a better and protected environment through youth engagement. So acknowledging that most pressing need is to increase climate resilience in the community, especially in the urban community, which is associated with the sharing of access of information. We decided to engage ourselves by doing what we can regardless of limitation. So you can see in the picture some of the activities that we do. The first one, we do community awareness or environmental education session for the public. So we go to school, we try to break down the effects of climate change in the language that students will be able to understand and read to. So in this sector, we use methods such as creating curriculum, and then also now we are exploring on including the creation of animation. So once we educate the students about climate change using animation, because no one really has a cartoon, grown up, even young people, even children, they do like cartoons. And then we also do small action that involve the youth, tangible action. By tangible, I mean doing competition, debate competition, or writing competition, or like activity that's quite familiar with everyone, planting a tree. But we use it as an opportunity to really showcase that youth can be the source of power, and then the youth, especially students from the age of 15 and below, they can be the source of hope for our planet. And the other part of how we do it is we do advocacy. By advocacy, we mean that we do our best to bring the perception and the reality of the vulnerable community at the decision-making table. So we do this by participating in the international negotiation of climate change. We've been participating since 2018, and we are not tending to stop because we were quite familiar of the climate injustice that's going on, and most of the current research is from the inequalities and the untransparent participation of the general public, especially from vulnerable communities. So we have reached more than 3,000 young people in Rwanda in form of our activities, and we have also created 5 community-based projects because we also want to be designing solutions that are tangible for our community. And one of them received a recognition. So that's the one who's creating animation for students. Next, please. So in 2020, based on the fact that we were participating in the negotiation and get to understand where the gap is, we were involved in shaping what is known today as the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, which, as said before, the main purpose is to increase the voice of vulnerable community in designing climate action to address loss and damage. So one of the ways that we do it is that we try to gather one voice and pressure global leaders by sending open letters. We send an open letter to the COP26 presidency, to the United States of America, and another one to the EU. And now recently, last week, we published our COP26 statement. You can check it on our website. But the most message that we're giving out to the world is that we want the loss and damage to be prioritized in the upcoming negotiations and even beyond. But most importantly, we want the loss and damage finance, because the finance gap that is between the impact and the current reality is quite enormous and injustice. That's why we need to address that gap if we want to have a stable future, because currently there's no such a thing as a future that we are going to all have if we are not able to address the climate change impact and deliver solution that's going to be able to meet our community needs. Next, please. So in summary, as something that I can share, because I think this one is my last slide. The first thing I would say is that we can all engage in promoting a green and planned urbanization in our community for our planet. because that is a solution. Because yes, we do want to develop, because no one, we do want to upgrade our lifestyle, but we can do it in a way that's going to promote a stable future for us and our children. So one of the way I was thinking that we can do it, I can propose to everyone who's here, is that first we can all choose to be a voice for our community, so that we can bring to the fore the social, economic, and environmental challenges that result in unplanned urbanization. So try to showcase the fact that when we are doing by communicating to our country or like global leaders, that when the urbanization is being unplanned, is kind of ruining our ability to have a safe planet. The second thing is that I think we can all contribute, as the previous speaker said, in contributing small activity aiming to strengthen the climate resilience of our planet. So one of the things that I could think is that like we can all practice the 7 habits of green growth, which is it could recycle, reuse, use refillable water bottles, reduce your carbon footprint where possible, eat more green where possible. The last is like we can align to demand change in the global system of climate action, because let's be frank, we the youth, we are the ones who live longer with the climate change impact that results from unsustainable climate solution that the world is undertaking. It's simply logical for us to claim to be acting just for our planet, because in the past I think we're so kind to remain silent, but now the level of injustice and the level of inequality is simply calling us to act together and to demand concrete change. Next. So that was my last sentence. And for more information or anything you want to ask, please don't hesitate to reach me out. You can see all the contacts from the Green Fighter and the Loss and Damage Coalition. I will be willing and very grateful if anyone has a question. You can reach out and we'll be able to respond. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope I didn't become too boring with a lot of talking. Thank you so much.
Okay, another insightful information from our second speaker. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Ineza from Rwanda. Hereby, I summarize the presentation from our last session with second speaker, Ms. Ineza. The speakers itself already inspired us related to climate change, for example, about equality, climate justice, and advocacy. So starting from the first slide, we know that climate crisis is attacking the high-risk and vulnerable area, especially in Global South. And knowing that the participants in here are mostly coming from Asia, and actually Asia is countries that are prone to vulnerable in climate change. So it is one of our main concerns. And secondly, urbanization is one of the contributors to climate change. So it is reminding to us about our carbon footprint, because the carbon footprint may increase greenhouse gases, rise temperature of Earth, and cause climate change. And also, moving on, the Green Fighters contribution, which is Green Fighter, related to what Ms. Ineza said before, they are bringing solutions in Rwanda. It is one of the youth NGO in creating an access, connection, and encouraging youth. What can we do? So one thing that we can do is increasing the community awareness related to environment, which is what the Green Fighter did. And secondly, break down the effect of climate change to the activities. The sample of what they did is, for example, the planting the tree, and showcase that youth have the power to their community, and that we have the power to affect the community. What we do is to advocate, by mean is that to participate, for example, in negotiation, either in the national or international, related to climate change. And other thing that Ms. Ineza also brought is about the gender equality within the community of organization or non-organization of youth. So reaching more than thousands of youth in Rwanda, They designed to reach vulnerable community, since the climate change itself affect the vulnerable community of or community or vulnerable areas. And in 2020, Lost and Damaged Youth Coalition was created, which it is engaging in green organization to community. So there are two suggestions and recommendations that we youth can do from the Ineza slide. The first one is that we can connect to other youth and creating a community or non-organization community. It is can also related to the climate change, and we can act as an individual to contribute to the climate action. For example, is that we have to create a habit to reduce our carbon footprint. For example, eating more green and maybe reducing the plastics. So that is all for the summarize. Thank you so much, Ms. Ineza. Okay, moving on. We open the question and answer sessions. To participants who would like to ask a question to the speaker, please do send the question to the chat box. Or if you want to open the mic to tell you your question, you may raise your hand. Okay, maybe while waiting for other speakers, I would like to ask to Ms. Rwanda regarding the youth community that you have started. What is your suggestion for us as a youth community if we want to create an organization related to climate action or maybe other related, but it is still related with sustainable development goals? Like one of the goals, what is your recommendations to us if you want to create an organization? What are the key points that we must to understand or establish, or the characteristics of NGOs or community that you would like to share with us?
The first thing I will share is please don't give up, because you know something better that and by you I mean the youth in general, that we can share with the world, because we have the ability to be quite ambitious, creative, innovative in driving the solution. And when the system becomes too hard, because the process doesn't really give an opportunity for the youth to be included in a sense, we just need to focus on what really matters. Because I think it's Abida who said it, if you cannot do great things, do small things in a great way. I think it's one of the quotes that he likes to share. And then I will speak on that one, because regardless of how ambitious we are, if we don't focus on what we can do and do it best, regardless of the challenge, we will lose our track. Because once you focus on what you can do, even if small, you'll find other youth who want to focus on the same thing as the one you are focusing on, and then together you can drive emergence or like big change while focusing on small things. And the other thing I would suggest is like, please don't give up, because it's our future that we're claiming for. It's simply logic for us to claim what is ours, in a sense that will make us be more hopeful to have a future. That would be what I would share.
Okay, that was such a great question. That was such a great answer. Be hopeful for the future, especially for us youth, as we are the future generations. Okay, there is an appreciation from Syed Majid Ali. They totally agree with the speaker that we have to spread awareness. Yes, spreading awareness and is important for us. And the next one is from Safillah Bey. They stated that it is a marvelous presentations. And also from speaker Denny Adiputra, congratulations for establishing such a great organization. Denny has a question. Is climate change a hot topic among the youth in Rwanda? Does the government implement any policies in support of this? For example, various support to organizations like yours.
Thank you so much. I would say like our country really takes it very serious about the protection of the environment. The first thing I will share is that we are one of the countries in Africa where we want to develop, have an economic growth, but everything is like we need to have a green economy development. So everything about Rwanda is green. Whether you want to be in business or the tourist area or even in education, we want to promote the sense of understanding that for us to be, for a country to be prosperous on a sustainable way, there needs to be an inclusion of the protection of environment. So we call it green. And on the other side is that Rwanda has an updated environmental and climate change policy. And if you take a close look in it, you find that there's a clear way for the youth to be engaged because Rwanda is one of the countries where we believe that for a solution to really have a major impact, there's gonna be a way the youth are included, and the inclusion of the youth shouldn't be tokenistic, which means if youth want to contribute on something, there shouldn't be such a thing as gatekeepers or people who are making it hard for them to understand how to be involved. One of the concrete examples I could give is that we are a country, and we are young people, but still we can sit with our government to give input, and we can participate in the international negotiation process and try to contribute as much as we can, in a sense that we'll be able to achieve a future or a right space or the right space for our country. So yes, environment is a hot topic, but then we do have here some challenges, which is like inequality in access of information or education or new technology. But we don't play the victim in that sector because we tend to to develop homegrown solution in every sector. And when we talk about homegrown solution, that will be a solution that will include the three aspects, that is people, planet, and the economy. So yeah, that would be the answer I can give right now.
Okay, thank you so much, Ineza. So there is another question from Toy O. They come from Ethiopia. Wonderful presentation. I got a question for you. Please, what are the main environmental issues in your country and how are you dealing with it? What measures are you taking to mitigate or minimize it?
That's a really hard question. I will do my best to respond based on my knowledge. The first thing, sorry, now I have a background knowledge. Just give me 1 second. Can you still hear me clearly? Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You may continue.
Thanks. I was saying that the one of the challenges that I can give out is flooding and erosion, because like last year our country we lost more than 4,000 hectares of crops due to the rain and flood. And when we lose like a crop field, this means like we are losing a source of the economic development for our people, because most of our population rely on agriculture as a source of economic growth. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we're facing. And the way we're doing to minimize this is that we are increasing the ability of creating or like introducing smart agriculture in the population, so that our population won't be practicing rain-fed agriculture, because rain-fed agriculture is more vulnerable. And then the other challenge we are facing is I can say like the environmental knowledge gap, because there's no such a thing as a common understanding, not a common understanding, that's a big word, like a very well-structured way to access information climate change in a specific language that will speak to our community. And one of the way we're doing to minimize this is to do our best to transmit climate change and environmental information from the top to down. So by top to down, what I mean is that when, for example, our Ministry of Environment is having a new approach that we want to all take to protect our planet. For example, which is what we are doing currently, which is the ban of the single-use plastic in the whole country. So what happens is that we do our best to make sure that even the very, very down, like in the rural area, in the family house, in every family, everyone has the information that we are going to ban the single-use plastic, and then everyone become a driver of that change. So that's one of the way we do it. And those are the two main things that I can think as the big challenges right now. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. To summarize a little bit, so one of the issues in Rwanda is about the crop field, which is caused also by the natural disasters. It is also related by climate change, in which the crop field is important for the economic development. And what can we do our best is to already mentioned it before, to spread the awareness itself to the rural areas. And I think taking a note from Rwanda's presentation before, is about what can we do as an individual to reduce our carbon footprint. Okay, moving on to the next question. There is questions from Wakai M. Sharif from Liberia. How engaged are you with national government and youth organizations in your country in implementing your projects?
Thank you so much for the question. I will start on how we involved with the national government. I think that's the word that I use. I would say like one of the way we do our engagement is that we work together. So we are partners, because whether you call it government or whether you call school or like businesses, we all want one thing, which is a prosperous and stable future for our children. And so we do have some consultation on a regular basis to check in like what's new in the government side and what's new on the youth side, and what's the best strategy we can do to align our forces, because we value ourselves internally and externally. And then the other thing about the youth is that we do our best to increase partnership and make it easier for the youth to reach to us, which means whenever we are having an event, we always seek to listen before we speak ourselves or we speak our mind, and that really open ideas for new partnership or new way or new approaches, not only in youth located in Rwanda, but also outside Rwanda. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So another question from Musadik Mubarak from India. The question is, what are the best ways to preserve water bodies?
So one of the best way to protect water bodies is to really respect them and respect the whole process they're using, because the water bodies are what people they lack on Earth, in a sense, for me, in my understanding. So which means by protecting the water course, we need to, all the water bodies, we need to make sure that from what we eat to what we drink, everything is as green as possible and as protective as possible. So that would be one of the answers I could give. But the other thing is to consider like our choices that we make in the agriculture sector can really influence the pollution in our water bodies. So which means like the practice of smart agriculture or green agriculture is one of the best ways to protect our water bodies. And also waste management is also one of the ways that can really protect our water bodies. So that would be my answer for it right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, another question. We have a lot of questions here. They are so excited for this. From Irum Nias Ansari, awesome presentation. This is Irum from Pakistan. My question is, do you consider school and children how to take care of our environment?
Yes, we do consider the children, because children are the future. So one of the way we do it, as I said, we create curriculum that are really reasonable for our children. And also now we are in the process of creating cartoons where in 2 minutes or 1 minute and 30 seconds, children can understand that once people concept about the environment, let's say waste, air pollution, or biodiversity, and get all the information with a call of action that they can undertake.
Thank you so much. Okay, this might be our last question since there's none. From Rudwan Ibrahim from Sudan, very respectful opinions. My question is how the African community can build an environmental structure to limit climate change so that we do not go back when we are at an age trying first to understand climate change. As for the recommendation, I recommend to you, it must be governments or environmental councils set laws or impose environmental taxes. Unfortunately, in my region, I mean my country, the environment is not considered as one of the most important ministries.
Yeah, that's a good input, and I think like a very great question. And I think one of the ways that we can start, especially in a country where the environment isn't considered as important, is try to really explain to the leaders that without the environment, there's no future for them. Because if our environment is destroyed, there's no food, there's no water, and there's no like a future. Because at the end of the day, people cannot eat money. So some countries think like development, like quick development, like industrialization is what we need, like making more money is what we need. But if we come together as youth, especially in Africa, because I think that that's the example I can give. If the youth come together and make it clear that there's no future which is not considering the environment, and do like one simple document that can be shared, for example, with the Africa Union, because with the Africa states that are included, I think that can make a big change instead of because we'll be addressing not as one person addressing one government, it will be one voice of African youth addressing the African leaders. And I think that one can be very strong and can open our eyes and it's going to change of mindset.
Okay, thank you so much, Ineza, for presentations and answers. We hope the answers already concluded for the questions here. We conclude the question and answer sessions. To participants, we may come to the closing of the event now. Coming to the last session, don't forget to fill our feedback form if you want to get the e-certificate. So we are coming to the documentation and closing by our host. So Kalila, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Seruni. Sadly, guys, we come to the end of this event. But before we're saying goodbye, please open your camera if you're able, because we will do documentation. Okay, so we're going to start the documentation now. Cheese, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Since there is a lot of slides now, so I did a lot of cheese, sorry. And okay, guys, don't forget to fill our feedback form to get an e-certificate. So if you guys haven't filled out the feedback form that we already share on the chat box, please fill it now. And we want to remind you for our next webinar on the 4th of October. If you guys haven't registered yet, please register it because it will be more interesting and more exciting. And if you guys haven't followed our Instagram, you can follow our Instagram account at Young Southeast Asia to know about more the updates about our webinar in the future. And lastly, I want to remind you again for the feedback form. If you guys haven't seen it on the chat box, you can ask for it. And if you haven't filled it yet, please fill it now. So guys, thank you so much for those who already take your time to join our webinar tonight. We really hope that we can accompany you guys. We can give you more beneficial information from the presentation that all the speakers have done. And we will see you again to our second webinar in the World Habitat Day. Thank you so much, everyone. Good night. Bye-bye. We'll see you again on the next fourth webinar of Young Southeast Asia. Thank you everyone who already participated.